So we're going to look at these 9 personality types. And so the 1, we're going to start with the 1. So the 1 would be the one here wearing the glasses teaching, I've got the right idea to tell you. That would be the 1. And the 1 lives by these kind of quotes. These are things they might say. I have to do things myself so they're done right. Very hard for a 1 to trust somebody else to do things perfect enough. And then they come home from the job they've done and think, oh, I should have done a better job with this or with that. They're real critical of themselves. Before going to something, they might be real worried about, oh, am I dressed appropriately? They want to do everything really right. They're really sincere and earnest in that.
Now, the 1 in the Bible who would be a model for us would be the Apostle Paul. And Paul begins as, when he's Saul, he's a legalistic, self-righteous Pharisee. We got any legalistic, self-righteous Pharisees here? And Paul is trying to keep Judaism pure, and he thinks that Christianity is a cult, and that he doesn't believe in Jesus, and so he's trying to exterminate these Christians, and then that leads to charges of blasphemy, and then that leads to Stephen becoming the first martyr, and Paul presiding over that. You see Paul's anger. You see his self-righteousness. You see even as when he comes to Christ, you see him, especially early on, as a very zealous disciple, and he's a great reformer. Right? Ones are reformers. And Paul, talk about a reformer. He reforms Judaism, and Christianity is birthed as the following Jesus and grace and freedom from legalism. Paul takes us away from rules and perfectionism, because now we're seeing Paul in his redemption, right? And the visionary apostle of grace. Ones are visionary. When they integrate at the 7, at the happy, joyful 7, they become gracious. And so you just think about Paul, in jail, writing the letter to the Philippians while he's in jail, and it's joy, 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 right? See, that's Paul having integrated so much at the 7. So we've already talked with you about, I'm a 1. I know that we've got some other 1s here. How many of you think you might be 1s? We can admit this.
Good. Yeah.
Am I the only male 1 here?
No.
Oh, there we go. Okay.
Yeah.
Good. Yeah. So this is a place of confession. This is a safe place. See, the funny thing is, like Christy said, we're all the emperor with no clothes on.
Yeah.
I'm the slowest one to see, myself, right? But everybody else has been seeing it all along. So an example for me is a 1. 1s have pockets of perfectionism. Now, it's not that other types can't too, but it's just 1s are like, the masters of perfectionism. So if you were to walk into my closet, it'd be like, wow, everything is like really organized in my closet. You got all the short sleeve button-down shirts are here on the same kind of hanger. They're all facing the same way. Then you got the pants. They're all down here. And you got the casual pants to the left, the dress pants to the right.
We've been married 30 years, and just last week he had to tell me where the socks go when I'm putting the clean socks back in his drawer.
I'm always rearranging the socks. And I got a 2-wing, and so I just appreciate she's doing the laundry. I don't want to, trouble her with that. So it's been 30 years, and I haven't told her. Well, you could put the socks here; it would help me. So then she says to me, "Well, it would help me if you would she's got a 1 wing. Well, why don't you label, brown, blue, black? It's kind of hard to see it." Yeah, so the whole closet's organized. Casual shirts are over here, long sleeve shirts. Because it helps me having it organized to find what I want. If you go onto my computer, it's like the files are just, everything is in its right folder. I know exactly where things are. I can find anything. Because it's stressful for me if I can't. It just makes my life work better. But these are pockets. There are other areas of my life that are not so organized. Because the thing with perfectionism is you tend to be all or nothing. And so if it's hitting your radar like it's important to you, or you feel like you have time or energy, you're making it perfect. But then stuff that's not hitting that radar, it might be a disaster. You just never look at it. You just keep ignoring it because you're doing this over here. So that's us who are ones. Somebody who's a one keeps a paintbrush in his car to dust out the air vents. There's an idea for you, huh? I don't do that.
I have a one wing. I do.
Yeah, I just learned that Christy has a makeup brush in her car. I've seen it before. I never knew. She uses that to dust out the air vents. Like my one-wing wife. It's like, wow. See? You can see why when you marry your neighbor, you know, because that's the Enneagram, these shades of meaning, you see. So if you're a one, you've probably got some 2 in you and some 9 in you, or you could develop that. So it's easier for you to understand and connect with those neighbors who could be a wing for you. And the wings, remember, they're not automatic. Just because it's next, you have to develop it for it to actually be one of your wings. So the phrase for ones like me is, it's never good enough. It could always be better.
And you love to improve things.
Yeah, I love it.
You're passionate about that.
I can be tortured by it.
Yeah.
So apart from the integrating I've done at the 7 and spiritual formation work I've done, 1 hour from now would be like a really dangerous time. Because we finished the presentation, and an unredeemed bill would go into all the things that could have been better, and finding fault with that. So just imagine being a 1 who's a teacher or a pastor, you see. And 3s do this too, because 3s are into success. It's a little different for the 3.
So if you're in a relationship with a 1, it's really important to know that criticisms just stick on him like Velcro. But compliments are like slide off of him like Teflon. They don't really impact him very much.
Now, I've made some growing in grace progress, so that's not totally true anymore as I integrated the 7. But that's the nature of a perfectionistic 1, is they have trouble receiving the compliments and the criticisms stick. And this is a psychological principle that is an example of how the Enneagram is so helpful to you. So you're in a relationship with a 1, or you're ministering to a 1, you got a 1 in your small group, and you want to be loving to them. Well, you just be really careful about criticizing them, because the average 1 is already so self-critical that if you criticize them, it's 2 against none. So we'll take questions. Please write it down. We want to come back to that, but we're going to kind of go through the types. So another thing about a 1 is to-do lists. You go to my desk, you will always find a to-do list where I'm writing down, the latest stuff that I'm working on and checking. We like checking those things up. Oh, that's done. Oh, that's done. Got to keep track of that stuff. And so the felt need of the 1 is, got to do better. I could do it better than that. And the vice now, or the root sin, is resentment. 1s have hidden anger. You think about it, it makes sense when you're trying so hard to do what you should and to be good. At some point, you're going to have some frustration about that, all that responsibility.
And temptation to criticize and judge others who aren't working so hard and aren't trying so hard and aren't being so earnest to do things right and well.
And then, as I've been growing, you see more of the virtue in me, maybe?
Yes, and the virtue for the 1 is that growth and contentment and serenity, that it's good enough. And so I've seen a lot of ability for you where I'll say, what do you think? It's good enough. Praise the Lord. It's good enough. So.
And we see so much of that in Paul in Philippians, contentment, peace, along with the joy. Now, in stress, when 1s are stressed out, they will tend to go towards the weakness of the 4. This is one of the lines now. This is the dynamic. This is what's on your chart here. See, in the 1, there's a line to the 4, but the arrow is not going towards the 4 for the 1, because that's the unhealthy direction. That's where we're going in stress. We want to be more special, more unique. We want to get more attention. We're feeling envious of other people who are getting that attention or doing really well. And that leads to moodiness and depression and detaching from other people and aggravated resentment and complaining.
But when they're secure and they're moving towards their redemption and integration point, then they can become very positive and focused on the good and enthusiastic and even spontaneous as they enjoy the moment and they're content with it.
Some experiments for the one to grow in grace would be things like, we've mentioned quiet, abiding prayer. There's the gut people like that. That's great for ones. Appreciating God's presence, just being with God. We're not human doings, we're human beings. Avoiding shoulds. Practicing that word good enough. Really important for us ones. And enjoying the moment with the Lord. Another one is when you're in a group, this has been really helpful to me, just try on the idea. Maybe someone else has a better idea. Because the ones always think that we need to have the right idea. But it's a gift of love to others, and it helps us to relax, to say, well, I don't have to come up with a good idea. Somebody else might have a good idea.
So the two, the helper. And the two was perfectly exemplified this morning by your pastor's wife, Kim. She's a beautiful two. And you see her bring me tea? The two is always serve, I can care for you. Anticipating a need, something you might want or like, and then acting in love for that to help.
We've been eating a food basket all weekend that Kim prepared for us.
Yep, that's right.
All our meals are covered.
Yeah. So how many of you in here are twos? Look at all the twos in ministry. Awesome. Yeah, that's great, because we're the ones that we want to care, we want to help. So two's a good place.
No wonder this is such a warm community.
Yeah.
Sense of belonging here.
Yeah. So the twos, see if you resonate with any of these things. When you're with somebody, preoccupied with how can I get them to like me? Or when you've left, you have a thought like, oh, I feel bad for taking so much attention onto myself. These are very others focused. Or maybe when you've gone and you've left and you're looking back, oh no, I'm afraid maybe I hurt her feelings. Very, very concerned about what other people feel, wanting to make other people feel safe.
A model two in the Bible is the Apostle John. And we meet the Apostle John as someone who is going to the negative of the 8 for false consolation. And the 8 is aggressive, and we see John wanting to, remember how he wants to call down fire from heaven and zap those people that rejected the gospel. Or remember how he's being ambitious with his brother James, and he wants to sit at the right hand of the throne of God in the coming kingdom of glory, right? And that's a lot of 8 stuff there where he's going to in points of stress. I mean, the latter example of sitting at the right hand, Jesus has been talking about suffering and dying, and there's a lot of stress on the apostles at that point in time. But then we see John, moving towards integration at the 4. That's where the 2 integrates, is towards the strengths of the 4. And if we haven't made it clear, let's just back up and repeat that when we talk about going to your integration point, so in this case, the 2 integrating at the 4, we're talking about looking at the strengths of the 4. That's where you're going to integrate, is the strengths of the 4. Now, it is good for anybody to learn from the strengths of the 4, even a 1. Now, for us ones, the 4 is like the danger. Like, well, be careful about the 4. You're like attracted to the weaknesses of the 4, but that gets you in big time trouble. So we have to be careful, with that one. But anybody that could develop the strengths of the 4 would be a good thing. But the theory is that the 2 especially needs that. That's the theory. Okay. Now, so we're talking about the 2 needs to go towards the 4 now. Same thing now with the disintegration point. I was saying how the 2 will go to the 8. That's the weaknesses of the 8. The false consolation or disintegration path is always you're going to the weaknesses of that, under stress, thinking that's going to help you and give you security, but it doesn't. So the 2 needs this sense of power, and they want to go to the aggressive, angry 8 to get that power. But instead, they need to go towards the strengths of the 4, and the 4 feels like, well, my needs matter too. I'm special. I can ask for what I need. See, 2s don't feel like that. But if they learn from the 4, then they do. And so that's the 2's way to be assertive, is through the 4. And this is what John learns. And so we see him, later in the Gospels, he starts referring to himself very humbly as a disciple Jesus loves. 5 times in his Gospel. His identity is rooted in his belovedness to God and to Christ. And we see him at the Last Supper laying his head on Jesus' chest. Don't you love that scene? and his gospel, his epistles, they're all about love, you see. And so John, the helper.
The 2 is really, we take pride in how loving we are. That's our root sin, the pride, that I know what you need, that I can take care of you. And so that's where we need to repent of that and recognize and own that we have needs. This operates unconsciously because underlying the 2s, we feel this deep shame and this deep fear that we're unloved, unlovable, that we're not going to be wanted. And so what we do to cope with that is we try to make ourselves needed. We try to secure ourselves by taking care of you such that you'll need me. And well, maybe you won't love me, but at least you'll need me. And that feels like love.
And that's all unconscious.
It's all unconscious. So the 2s are all about trying to meet your need and paying attention to what your emotions are and your feelings are. They're super sensitive to what you're feeling. They're very empathetic. They're strong in mercy. But the problem there is that they're not internalizing any value and any of God's love for themselves. And they're not paying attention and admitting that they have a need. So it's very hard for 2 to ask for help. But then it's very important for the 2 to feel appreciated. If the 2 is not appreciated and feels taken for granted and feels like other people start to expect them and to make them responsible for their needs, then that's where the 2 is really tempted to go to the 8 and get angry and demanding and controlling. The 2s can tend to be pretty codependent. Can you see that in this? Where they have like this unwritten contract. Well, I'll take care of you, but then they expect you to take care of them. So then when that isn't returned, that's where they start to feel unappreciated. They deny their emotions too long, and then they erupt with all this. Well, you never take care of me. You never do anything for me. I'm doing this, this, and this for you. And they go to the 8, and they can start to attack.
So you might have noticed in church yesterday when we did the interview with Kim on empathy and hope in relationships and so forth, one of the things that came out, I think this was in one of the services, we talked about how helpful it was as you would learned early in our marriage to ask for what you needed from me.
Yeah.
Because early in our marriage, Christy didn't do that because that's the problem the 2 has. They're not aware of their emotions and needs. It's repressed, and they're tuned into what everybody else feels and needs. And unconsciously, they're trying to meet their own needs by meeting other people's needs, you see. So as Christy became increasingly aware of her own emotions and needs and then would be assertive to ask for that, see, that actually really helped me because then I know how I can care for her.
Yeah. So with the 2s, we need to recognize that we have value, that God has created us valuable as we are. The shame that we feel causes us to tend to do things like introduce ourselves, like I'll introduce myself as Bill's wife or as my kid's mom. And that's a typical thing for 2, to kind of associate with somebody else and put their value and worth there instead of recognizing God has created them for their own value and worth.
And then I've seen you grown so much in wholeness and holiness. In an Enneagram, we can see that as well. You're integrating at the 4. So the way, like I said, like the way you will ask for what you need, from me, or you'll say, Bill, I'm having some feelings. Can you listen and empathize with me? And that directness, you're going towards the 4. My needs matter too, you see, and just your expression of your creativity in many ways, like in our home and through decorating and things like that. You're going to that 4 because a lot of times 4s can be artistic and so forth. And then the other thing I've seen is that earlier in our marriage, when you were less integrated, you could sometimes be more like dependent and even maybe a little bit clingy, right?
2s could be clingy.
But you've integrated the 4, and so you're able to have a lot more space and alone time and be okay with that. Sometimes. Right. I mean, you're still very relational.
Yeah, very affectionate. 2s are affectionate. Yeah. we like to be close.
Now, so do you see how this now helps me to love Christy? It's like, hey, appreciating her, being affectionate. These are like, big time connectors for her when I'm that way. And so we've just kind of over the years had to kind of learn that.
Yeah. So spiritual disciplines that help 2s. Solitude and silence. We need that because we need to be at a place where we're not pleasing anybody else because 2s are big people pleasers. So having time in solitude and silence where we're really just tuned into God and who we are in Him, really, really helpful and important for us. And then boundaries. Jesus says, let your yes be yes and your no be no. 2s need to learn boundaries. We have a hard time setting boundaries because we're so worried about what other people will think about us. And we're so desperately trying to earn your love by loving you well.
So let's talk about the 3, the performer, the achiever.
Yeah, so the performer, I'm thinking of my friend, the achiever, and she sells a health product, and so she's always saying, look how healthy I am, look how this has helped me, boy, you really need this product, and, they're performing, they're achieving, they're go-getters. And the 3s say things like this: it's important that I make a good impression here. They're very concerned about their image. They really want to be admired. They're thinking, why don't others work as hard as I do? 3s can be workaholics because they're driven for success. They've got to be successful in everything they do, and they'll work relentlessly at that. Failure is not an option. And they're always thinking things like, I can do a better job at that than he or she did, because they've got this addiction to success, to performing, to achieving. They're always going after that trophy. How many 3s? 3s? Got a couple. Yeah, a couple 3s. Oh, don't see, they're in the shame triad, so they hang their head. The 3s.
I'm actually surprised we don't have more 3s, because a lot of pastors are 3s. 2s and 3s. A lot of pastors.
Yeah.
So Jacob in the Old Testament is a model 3, right? I mean, you just see how determined he is to succeed, right? And how successful he is as a rancher, right? And you see the deceit. I mean, his name even means deceiver, cheat. That's what Jacob means, before he's renamed Israel, overcomer. He's very competitive with his father-in-law Laban, right? And he's workaholic. 3s are often workaholics. I mean, it's really hard to outwork a 3, although 1s and 8s can give a 3 a run for their money. 1, 8, and 3, and 7s can be really hardworking and also into success in different ways. So, we see him, he gets the beautiful wife, Rachel. And then, of course, there's the issues with he gets 2 wives, and Leah and so forth, and there's lots of competition going on there. But then we see Jacob integrate over at the 6, and the 6 is a wonderfully relational type. A redeemed, healthy 6 is very aware of their emotions. And so we see Jacob integrate at this, particularly in terms of his intimacy with God. He renames that area. This is Bethel, the house of God. We've got Jacob's ladder. Even the wrestling with the angel. I mean, you see some of the competitiveness of a 3, but you also just see the relationality of seeking God's blessing. And then notice how he walks with a limp, right? His hip gets wrenched. He walks with his limp. And then we get this great leadership principle. Leaders, God's leaders often have a limp. And oftentimes we're leading out of weakness. And that's a saving grace for the 3, is failure when it's redeemed. If you're totally into success and you think that's what you've got to do to be significant, if you have failure and then realize I'm still loved, right? So I know a 3 who made a lot of money and then lost all that money. And he would tell you that was one of the best things in his life because he really learned about God's grace. And then he went out and made a bunch more money, and now it's like, nope, he doesn't care about it. Just gives it away.
So the 3s deal with their shame by trying to impress other people. And they are very persuasive and inspirational. 3s are great because they really can read a room. They really know what people in the room are feeling, and they can really play to that. And they can really make you feel good. It often feels good to be with a 3. And but one of the problems is that they have a hard time dealing with their own feelings because their feelings are messy. So they tend to set those aside and just get to work and overwork because of that. And the other thing that's real hard for 3 is that they often feel loved for what they do. So love can feel very conditional for a 3. And they feel it just ups ante. I've got to do more, do better, succeed more to get the love that I need.
They'll use their ability to read people's feelings in order to succeed or sell whatever they're selling. And remember we said about, because we're in the heart triad now, right? Remember we said about the heart people that they're over-functioning and dysfunctional in the area of emotions. So they're really good at sensing what other people feel, but they're disconnected from their own feelings. Generally, that's 2, 3s, and 4s, but it's especially 3s because they're right in the middle of the triad. Think about it. If you're a 3 and you have a 2 wing, and even if you have a 4 wing too, even your wings are in the heart triad. You see, so your personality is very much dominated by feeling, and the dysfunction of that you're not in your own feelings.
Playing to everybody else's feelings. Yeah.
And so the felt need is for success. Threes want to succeed.
Yeah, they do. And where they go in stress is sometimes they just feel exhausted from all this work and all this performance. And sometimes they can just totally shut down and stop trying. Or more commonly, we see them kind of going into just mind-numbing work and working all the harder and shutting down through the work or becoming kind of passive-aggressive with other people.
You see, that's a three that's doing mind-numbing work or just circles of busyness is going to the weaknesses of a 9, which is the root sin of the 9 is lethargy. And so the 3 is flipping to another extreme from overworking to a shutdown mode. And that seems like that's going to bring comfort, but not for the 3. The 3 needs to go to the strengths of the 6, get more aware of emotions, connect with people, be more loyal, and that's what's going to bring true consolation for the 3, not the weakness of the 9, you see? So that's where the 3 is living on its lines. Remember, we live on our lines. The 3 is going towards the underbelly of the 9. Oh, I've been working too hard. I just need to shut down. But that actually becomes depressive. They can get kind of whiny and passive aggressive and like a victim and blaming other people. But no, if they will instead activate towards the strengths of the 6, relationality, loyalty, and so forth, that's going to be much better for them. And so what's happening here is they're overcoming that root sin of deceit and moving towards the virtue of authenticity. A redeemed 3 is so authentic, so genuine, you're so engaging.
And so spiritual disciplines that really help the 3s, Sabbath keeping, do no work. They really need that. They really need a space to stop working so that they can learn to accept failure, not be dependent upon themselves and their competence and their achieving and their impressing people, and that they can actually be honest and confess and talk to the Lord about and get in touch with what they're feeling. Vacations is another thing. Vacations where they can really get an extended time without any work. Sabbaticals, important for a 3.
So they learn that love is the greatest of all, as the Bible says, is through relationship, not just through their accomplishments.
So the 4s, these are the romantics. Tend to be artists. We have 4s in here.
Any 4s?
Yay, yes, we have a 4.
Are you in the creative arts or the worship team or something?
Yeah. Good fit for you. That's great.
I know some 4s who are worship pastors and artists.
Yeah.
Creative thinkers, poets.
Yeah. So I'm thinking of a friend of ours who's a 4. The 4s, they like to dress kind of, different or flamboyantly or something distinct or unique. So I see you've got some earrings there, something distinct.
Look at the hat backwards.
The hat backwards. Yeah, they're creative. Even when they're dressed, they like to show that. And the 4s they're not afraid of the dark emotions, the dark sides, to show that. So the 4 that I know, her posts on Instagram always they're a little edgy. They're artistic, they're edgy, sometimes they're very colorful and flamboyant too. But she's not afraid to show kind of some depression or some of the emotions that the 3 would never want to show, because the 3 wants you to show the highlight reel, all the good, feel good, successful things. So you can see that. And so here's some things that a 4 might say. It feels like nobody truly understands me. 4s can feel really alone, really misunderstood. They're deep people, deep thinkers and feelers. 4 might say, I want to create something that's uniquely me and meaningful. 4 really, really meaning is a deep need of 4. And then a 4 might say when they've left being with people, why did I say the wrong thing again?
There's that self-consciousness there.
Mm-hmm.
So the Old Testament, we have Joseph, model 4. He's a dreamer, right? And he's got the coat of many colors, this flamboyant, flashy coat that his brothers are all, jealous about. We know his story. He's betrayed by his brothers. He's thrown in jail, forgotten, mistreated. He goes to the helper 2 for false consolation and becomes, a servant. He also gets depressed about that, which is typical of a 4. To be depressed is not a good thing. The creative edge for a 4 is melancholy, a little different than depression. You're not going into shame. You're not going into isolation. It's more reflective, more inspirational. Because 4s are at their best, they're deriving inspiration from these deep experiences. He integrates at the 1, Joseph does. He becomes focused. He becomes disciplined. And we see his strategic wisdom. When he gets his break, when he gets to interpret the dreams. It takes a lot of wisdom to do that from God. And we see him going to the 1 in that. And then he becomes the second in command in Egypt with Pharaoh, ruling Egypt. And he's a very strategic leader in power in Egypt.
Yeah, the 4s, they really want this desire to be unique, authentic, distinctive. And so they can fall into temptation to envy, to feel like somebody else is more special or more distinct or more unique or more creative than they are. And that could be a real vice for them. But their virtue is, as they move toward that 1, that serenity, that peace, that calm, they can be real emotionally balanced and calm, even in very stressful situations, and bring that gift of peace and calm.
So the conflict the 4 is trying to overcome is that on one side they just so much want to fit in, belong. They're heart people. They want to fit, but yet they also want to be so distinct and unique and authentic. And so there's a tension there between those two. And so you see that in 4s that on one side they can be really engaging, really connective, even be the life of the party, and very deep in how they relate. But on the other side, they can be very private, and they want their space. And so they're living between those two extremes. And so particularly under stress, as Christy has said, they can go into a depressing place and lose that distinctiveness and so forth, being overly sacrificial. But in wholeness, in holiness, in redemption, they're moving towards the focus and discipline, the good ideas of a 1. A friend of mine is a 4. He keeps a little moleskin journal with him, and he writes down good thoughts in there. I mean, the whole journal is just this little thing, but there are these key thoughts that he's going real deep with, and that helps him to be centered and to be focused there, and to find a sense of God's peace and so forth. I think the 4s have got to love Ephesians 3:10, that we are God's workmanship. We are God's poema, His poem, His special creation, because that's what 4s live for. And they love the Psalms because we sing the Psalms. As I said, often 4s are in churches are worship leaders or creative arts directors. And they also love the lament Psalms. 4s can be really contemplative, appreciate the melancholy, and they know that life isn't all and only happy. There are some things that are sad, and they find meaning in that, and they want to help us understand that.
So the 5, the observer. So the 5 has his nose at a book and is really thinking very carefully about what he's reading and studying and going deep with it. And the 5s, you probably would rather be home reading about the Enneagram than here listening to us in community.
Do we have any 5s here? I wonder if we any 5s?
Yeah, any 5s? Yeah.
See, I'm not surprised.
Yeah, not surprised either. Yeah, so 5s would think of, how can I get out of that meeting? They wouldn't want to be here. Or when can I get out of here? And then they might also be thinking something like, well, I need to tell them they're wrong, but I need to figure out first the best way to do it. They're very thoughtful of what they're doing.
A 5 would rather be in a library or be an actuary, looking at numbers, doing some math, than in a relational setting, in ministry.
And they avoid the spotlight.
So a 5 in the Bible is Thomas, another of our disciple of Jesus, and we see his anxiety. Because remember, now we're into the head triad now, and this is the fear and anxiety triad. And so Thomas is anxious, as others are as well around the cross of when Jesus is crucified. He runs, he hides when Jesus is arrested. But that continues even after he's risen from the dead. And so the disciples are together, and now it's a group of 11 instead of 12 because Judas has betrayed Jesus and killed himself. But we got only the 10 disciples. When Jesus appears, Thomas isn't there. See, 5s are very, very independent, and they're also cynical. And so you see, the doubts and cynicism of Thomas there, saying, well, unless I see him, with my own eyes, unless I touch those wounds with my own fingers, and so forth. But fives need to integrate at the healthy 8. And we'll be talking about the 8, but the healthy 8 is an amazing person because they're a great leader and that they know how to be assertive in a loving and generous way. And so when fives move that way, they get more activated because fives will isolate. They're in their heads. They're reading. They're kind of embarrassed and shy. They might want to connect, but they don't really know how to connect. So they're avoiding that connection. They got all this anxiety about it. But when they go towards the 8, they get more activated. They find some energy to say no. I mean, I know fives that would rather be mistreated and taken advantage of than to be assertive because they just so, it's hard for them to go towards that direction and say, well, I'm angry, or let's do it this way, or I want to do it that way. But when they can learn to do that and get that voice, it's really good for them.
The way that the fives deal with their fear and anxiety is to withdraw into this world of very complex ideas. And so they're learners. They love to learn and study things, and they come up with ideas and plans to secure themselves, to deal with their fears. And they often will really think through things. They can tend to really hoard knowledge, though. The fives they hoard knowledge. They just gather all this knowledge. But you really need to draw it out of them. They don't offer it. They'll be thinking about it when they're with you, and they'll be like, well, I know a lot about this. I know more than anybody here, but they're not gonna share it unless they're pretty redeemed and they're moving towards that 8 in healthy leadership to offer it in service and leadership to others. So it's a beautiful thing when they do that. But you can see how in stress, they feel this fear, they move towards unhealthy 7, and they will they'll become kind of scattered. They'll repress their emotions, and then they'll make a plan. 7s are real planners. We'll get to that. They'll make a plan for how they can secure themselves and protect themselves from feeling fear and anxiety. And that's where some of the hoarding, especially hoarding of knowledge, but temptation to also hoard other things. So my dad was a 5. So he built up all kinds of investments and had rental properties and all these planning financially because he grew up in poverty. And so he had ways that he was securing himself with all this financial planning.
Yeah, so 5s are hoarders, and they'll hoard money too. And as Christy said, they're going to the weakness of a 7 for false consolation. They want to plan excitement. They want to plan things that are going to make them feel good, and they want to plan ways of securing themselves with knowledge or money. But at the healthy 8, they become generous, and they share their wisdom, they share their resources, and they're a great blessing to others.
They've got great ideas and principles that they have to share, too. And spiritual disciplines that really help them are coming into a safe relationship, a one-on-one relationship, like with a spiritual director or counselor who can really draw them out and listen to them and help them to be able to share some of their wisdom and get in touch with their emotions and what they're feeling, which is difficult and takes some time and a lot of space. They have to really develop a deep trust before they're going to go there to their emotions. Also, really reading the Psalms that talk about all the emotions can be very helpful for a 5.
So they're practicing trust and self-disclosure and becoming more relational. Then we've got the 6, the loyal skeptic or fearful guardian.
So a 6 would be characterized by a police officer who's really serving, wants to keep the city safe, and says, let's work together, gets the neighborhood watch together. Let's work together to make our community safe. Okay, how many 6s here? Yay, yeah. Got three 6s. Your pastor's a 6. So 6s might think something like this. What should I do about this? They're very concerned to care and take care of anything that could be a problem. That's the fear driving them. They might think, why did I say that? Kind of some fear about what they might have said. And here's key for the 6. Am I prepared in case something goes wrong? So the 6s could be pretty hypervigilant in terms of what might go wrong and am I prepared?
I know a 6 pastor and firefighter, and we hike together sometimes, and he just brings everything in his backpack. He's got everything we might need. He's got it. I mean, always prepared for what might go wrong. In the Bible, Timothy is a 6, a loyal disciple of Paul. Now, as a young church leader, he wants to succeed desperately, and he's going to the 3. 3s are all about success. And so it's false consolation for him to be into image and achievement, but then he struggles with being disrespected, remember, because he's a young pastor, and he's got a lot of anxiety and fear, and so his mentor, Paul, is comforting him and helping him with his fears and giving him some of the fear knots. All the head types, 5, 6, and 7, need those fear knots in the Bible. One of our most visited articles on Soul Shepherding website is Fear Not, 365 days a year. People are really drawn to that. A lot of us struggling with fear. And 6s are the most common Enneagram type. The most common Enneagram type, 6s. So Timothy struggles with anxiety and fear, but he integrates at a healthy 9. And he trusts Paul, his mentor. He's loyal to Paul. He's into community. 6s that integrate at 9 are just great at developing teams. Mm-hmm. I mean, we're experiencing the benefit of that right here in this room. I mean, Ron and Kim, have worked together. Ron is a 6, planted this church and grown this church and developed you and your abilities and working together, unity, teaming. The other thing about 6s, is so rich and vulnerable and such deep emotions. I mean, that's why so many 2s here. Part of why there'd be so many 2s here is because you have a 6 pastor who's so redeemed, so relational, a shepherding, caring pastor. And we 2s, oh, yes, we just want to be part of that, you see. So, and then, now the tricky thing with the 6 is a complex type. You can't, none of these are, like we said, you don't want to get too boxy, but that's especially true with the 6 because you've got counterphobic 6s that are like opposite of some of the things that I'm saying. Peter would be a counterphobic 6. He's impulsive. He takes risks. He's a fighter, right? Lopping off the guy's ear. He's part of the let's send down fire, on the bad guy stuff. But later Peter integrates at 9, and we see him in leadership, in uniting and teaming. And, the good shepherd, he's ministering the peace of the shepherd to us. But the counterphobic 6s are like, their way of not being fearful is to take risks, even to be reckless, because they don't want that fear stuff. So they're trying to go the other direction.
Yeah, they don't want to be controlled by fear. The felt need for the 6, both types of 6, is security and certainty. That's what they really want, because they're driven by this fear and this anxiety underlying them. And the 6 of the head type struggles with this most because they're the center of that head type. So if they have a 5-wing or a 7-wing, they're a head type in that fear triad. So it's important to remember that. But their virtue as they grow in redemption, as they find themselves at peace with Christ, as they move towards that 9, that sense of peace and trust. And then out of that, they act with courage. And leadership, they take a lot of courage to offer to other people in that.
You can see how the trust and loyalty of a 6 would tie them into the strengths of a 9. The 9s are peacemakers and so good at unifying and teaming, and that's what redeemed 6s are like. But the unhealthy 6s are moving towards deceit and the image and success stuff of a 3, the weaknesses of a 3. And so there's a fundamental conflict now here for the 6 that they're needing to work through in this path of redemption, which is the conflict between loyalty or trust and skepticism and fear. See, they've got these 2 opposing forces at work within them. They ask lots of questions. 6s are great once we're asking questions because they doubt themselves, because they want to be loyal and they're needing to learn. They want to do what's right. And questions can help them to come to a greater sense of trust. So some experiments for a 6 is, how they can grow in grace, meditating on scriptures that offer comfort and strength, because that's what they're needing. They're needing comfort for their fears, and then they're needing courage and strength also to deal with their fears. Gratitude showers, just immersing yourself in things to be thankful for about God, His character, His blessings, and so forth. I mean, these are good things for all of us, but especially for 6s. Or meditating on Jesus calming the storm, and saying, peace, be still.
So the seventh enthusiast, when the seven shows up in a room, you know they're there.
Yeah, we love the sevens.
So our daughter's a 7, and she'd show up to preschool, and it was a Jenny day because Jenny was there bringing her bright.
That's what the kids would say.
Yeah,
it's a Jenny day.
They would say.
She would only be there 2 out of 5 days a week.
So they bring that enthusiasm, that energy, that cheer, that joy wherever they go. So the 7 this is our daughter on a family cruise. She's got the sheet the cruise director gives out of all the events, and she's planning out, and she's got highlighted every minute. We're going to do this, we're going to do this, we're going to do this, and then this, because I don't want to miss out on anything. Because that's what the 7 doesn't want to miss out on anything in life. They want to take in. The root sin is gluttony. They want it all. They want all the good experiences and feelings.
And they'll deprive themselves of sleep to have more fun, more activities. We have some 7s here, I know.
Yeah.
Some of you are 7s. Yeah.
That's the 7. That's the only one?
There are other 7s.
Oh, okay.
Okay.
Bobby.
Couple
Great.
of us.
Yeah, good. So see if you resonate with any of these things, 7s. It's time to plan another party. Always looking for the next fun thing. I'll keep going as long as my body will let me. They're gonna keep pushing themselves. I want to keep all my options open. See, they don't want to be pinned in and tied down and confined because they want to live spontaneously to the best. They want to get the best good, the most bang for their buck.
So in the Bible, Solomon is a 7. He's extravagant in his unredempted nature early on, especially. But he's just over the top with seeking pleasure, hedonistic, sex, wealth, adventure, knowledge, whatever would make him happy, fame. I mean, he just goes after it, spares himself nothing. And but he over time he integrates at a more contemplative 5. Strengths of the 5, which is where the 7 needs to go. And we see his wisdom in the Proverbs, in Ecclesiastes. We see his being reflective and almost monkish in his spouting of wisdom and ideals for us. But the 7 disintegrates at the unhealthy 1. And so some of the more stuff with pleasure. Plan to have more fun. They're going towards the idealism of a 1. And so it's interesting where 1s and 7s can be so different, they can also be so alike in terms of just the relentless drive. The 1 driving for knowledge and to do the right thing, but the 7 driving for more fun, more pleasure.
Well, and the 7s, they really have a felt need to avoid pain and to be happy all the time. So that's what's really driving them. And it's because, they've got the fear, they're in the fear triad, but the way they're coping with it is all this busyness and distraction and not paying attention to any of the negative feelings or anything that's painful and avoiding that and distracting themselves with more self-indulgence and pleasure, which is their vice.
Because of this, they're the most prone to addiction. Mm-hmm. Of the 9 types, 7s have the most trouble with addictions of all kinds. Funny thing about 7s I know, they love sauces, and they're foodies. They like tastes, and dressings, and they're always making it, taste even better, and seasonings and so forth. And a lot of them love jokes. One of our 7s that we love, Joe Johnson in our TLC group, Oli Lena jokes, right? The guy in Minnesota from Norway, and they just love it. And the funniest thing when Joe tells his joke is how much he laughs, right? He laughs at his own jokes,
Yeah. 7s are usually great storytellers. Yeah.
Under stress, as I said, they go to the unhealthy 1, and they can become judgmental, blaming of other people, critical, and so forth. But in wholeness and holiness, they're going towards that 5. That's the healthy 5 with wisdom, with introspection and reflectiveness, and just a real peace and confidence there.
They'd be more present in the moment rather than so distracted by the next thing. Got to get here, got to get there.
So what the 7s can do to grow some spiritual disciplines, the first thing you might think of would be fasting. They need to learn to deny themselves some of these pleasures and find that there is actually joy in that, right? That, fasting is not deprivation. It's feasting. Yeah, we're depriving ourselves food or media or something else that we might normally enjoy, who are finding a greater joy in our intimacy with God or in our meditations on Scripture. Sevens need to learn that. They need to practice simplifying prayers because sevens get so scattered. There's so many things that they're curious about this is exciting. I want to do this. I want to try that. And they're so spontaneous and everything's just constantly changing for them with new opportunities. So a simplifying prayer, like, be still and know that I am God. See? Be still and know that I am. Be still and know. Be still. Be. Take some time with a prayer like that. That's really good for a 7. Psalm 46:10.
So the 8s, they're strong. You feel their presence in a room too because they come in with power. 8s are powerhouses and they're leaders. So they're kind of characterized by, do this my way. They're in control. They like to be in control. They need to be in control. So do we have 8s in here? Yeah, we've got an 8. I would think so because they're leaders. Okay, good. So see if you resonate with any of these quotes. All show him who's really in charge here. That need for control to be in charge. So an example of this would be, the 8, if you're in a movie theater and the film goes off, the 8 is going to be the first one to get up and act. He's going to take charge. He's going to go tell something needs to be done to fix this. Here's another quote. I don't see how raising my voice means I'm knocking people off their feet. They don't recognize their power, and people feel very overwhelmed by them oftentimes, but they don't realize because they're not aware of their power, their leadership. That they don't understand how they're running roughshod over people.
One of my 8s who's a friend, number 8 friend. I love 8s, especially redeemed 8s, of course. But he'll say, "Hey, Bill, how you doing? Oh, it's great to see you." Like, football guy, knocking. He doesn't mean anything bad by it. He's just intense.
Yeah,
got power there.
Yeah,
and power is a good thing when it's used for a good purpose. David in the Bible is our model 8, and I mean, gosh, as a boy he kills the giant Goliath. He's a military hero. When he's banished to the desert to run for refuge from Saul, who's trying to kill him unjustly. I mean, David's just been a blessing to Saul. But he's out in the desert and he gathers with other outlaws and he becomes their leader, their commander. And he's kind of like a military group and kind of like a monastery. It's very interesting what goes on there. He goes on to become the greatest king in Israel. 8s are amazing leaders. However, he goes to false consolation at the 5, becomes greedy for money, immoral sex, with Bathsheba's husband, gets him killed in battle. And, we see the weakness and bad stuff coming from an unredeemed 8 there. His sin leads to disintegration in his family, even the whole nation. And typical of an 8, he denies his fault, flies into a rage when Nathan the prophet confronts him. But then we see the redeemed 8 in David. And oh, do we see the redeemed 8. And wow. Sometimes we can be hard on 8s because their weakness might seem more obvious than some of the others with their intensity and their lust for power, which is their root sin. But a redeemed 8 is what every group needs because the redeemed 8 is generous and they serve and they help and they're relational and 8s are positive. They're very positive and optimistic and cheerful and see the good. And so in the Psalms, we see David integrated at the healthy 2. That's where the 8 needs to go, towards the healthy 2, serving, being considerate of other people, how they feel. And so we see David in the Psalms aware of his emotions and trusting God and helping us. It brings his journal to us in the Psalms, and they become the prayers of God's people and the prayers of the church. And then he develops others along with him, the sons of Korah, the sons of Asaph and others, and we have all these other psalmists in our Bible who did the same thing now. They share their prayers with us, and so many of them are laments. They're very vulnerable and tender, and there's weakness in them. And so in the best of David, we see a very redeemed, godly leader.
So the 8s, their underlying emotion is anger, but they move in that in a way that moves against, kind of a need to be against or need to be in control and to have the power. But you also see their anger come out towards injustice. And they could really be a real champion for the underdog. And they'll see somebody that has a real need, and they're like, I have to do something. And they're going to be the first to move with their leadership and power for that underdog to advocate for them. They're truth tellers. They're very blunt. Oftentimes you'll find an 8 because they'll just say it to you bluntly. They don't, him or her, sometimes people will say they're tactless, especially if they're an unredeemed 8 that hasn't moved towards that 2 with sensitivity and tenderness and compassion.
They might take over a group without even realizing they're doing it, sharing their opinions or what they think is right, and so forth. Even if they're not the leader of the group, is my point. And so their energy is around wanting more influence or power. And again, if this is redeemed, it's a wonderful, wonderful person. Some of our best partners in our soul shepherding ministry are 8s. We have 8s on our board. 8s are great board members. But the downside is they can have this lust for power, this aggressive energy that takes over, as we've said.
We want to make something happen now.
Yeah, they're like, ready, fire, aim.
No, ready, aim, fire.
It's supposed to be ready, aim, fire.
Oh,
but what they do is ready, fire, aim.
Oh, yeah, you're right. Yeah, they don't think first. Yeah, they kind of fire. Yeah.
So the stress reaction, as we said with David, is they go to an unhealthy 5 for false consolation. And that has them, 5s are very independent and withdrawn and disconnected from emotions. But then in the path of integration and growth, they're going towards the healthy 2, considerate and serving, empathizing with the feelings of others. Wow, an 8 that can empathize with others, what a gift that is. An 8 who can follow the teaching of Paul in 2 Corinthians 12, 9 to 11, when I'm weak, then I'm strong because of God's grace. I'll boast about my weaknesses so that Christ may be made manifest. What a blessing. And so experiments for growth for an 8, things like submission to God, and just, they don't have to be in charge. God's in charge. Even in a group, being able to submit to other people at times. 8s are in the body triad, 8, 9, and 1. So things like prayer walks. We who are in the gut or body triad, we like to be moving. Let's take a hike and be in nature. And that might help all of us, but the body types especially need that. It helps them to slow down their thoughts and their feelings to be moving their bodies. And a great discipline for an 8, but it's going to feel sort of torturous, is to, on the freeway, drive in the slow lane with Jesus. Not just the 8s, but the 7s, the 3s, and the 1s, and maybe others of us too have trouble with that.
And our last but not least number, the 9s. The 9s are often the most unrecognized, unappreciated of the 9 types. The 9 is kind of characterized by the piece. Can't we just all get along? Let's all get along cheerfully. That's what the 9s want. So they will say things like, "I don't want to deal with that now. I'm too tired." They'll shut down into feeling lethargic or being slothful because they're overwhelmed. And then they'll be passive and say, I'll just agree with whatever, because I don't want to rock the peace. I don't want to disrupt the harmony. I want harmony. But then they've got this other kind of anger rebel inside. There's a gut person that kind of says, but I don't think I'll actually do it. So any 9s in here? Yeah, lots of 9s. Peacemakers, ministry, ministry is another really great calling and fit for 9s, and really bring that peace, that harmony, the team player, the relationality of the 9.
Yeah, and Pastor Ron, as a redeemed 6, has a lot of 9 in him, because that's how it works, right? So that would be another thing that would draw 9s into Twin Cities church ministry staff. So the 9 in the Bible is Jonah. And you see how he famously runs away from God's challenging call for him to preach to the wicked of Nineveh, who have been Israel's enemies, and to preach to them, and to preach a message of forgiveness from sin, which is a great thing for a redeemed 9, but an unredeemed 9 is going towards the weaknesses of a 6, and you see that in Jonah he becomes fearful, sulking, depressive, and just, overwhelmed with negative emotions. And this is what 6s struggle with. And so you see Jonah going in that direction, like a classic 9 He's on the ship, and he's trying to sleep it off. It's like all this stress, all these the pressure, the problems. I don't want to go to Nineveh. He's just trying to sleep off his responsibility and make it all go away. But he activates at the healthy 3. That's what the 9 needs to do. They think that by resting more, that's going to help them, but that's not what helps them. Ironically, what helps the 9 is do something, activate. You don't feel like it, but do it anyway. And they get confidence from action, and especially when they team with people. And so, our daughter's a 9. She's at a very academic school at Westmont College in Santa Barbara. And so the way she studies is she likes to get together with friends and talk it out and be with people. And that helps her study. That helps her to learn. And we've taught her, well, you're moving towards the healthy 3. You're activating, But, she's got that wanting to cozy on down and hide, So her Facebook page today has a scarf like over her face, and she's like hidden, and she's going, oh, Mondays, so much responsibility. I just wish I could have more cookies and go to sleep. That's like so classic, the 9. It's like they just want to shut down because it just feels like too much. But again, Jonah obeys the Lord, and he does go to Nineveh, but then he goes back into sulking and the weaknesses of an unhealthy 6. But yet then his prophetic book lives on. We hope that later in his life he integrates more of the 3, but his prophetic book very much becomes a 3 book for all of us to be activated in sharing the gospel with people who need God's forgiveness and in bringing unity amongst people.
So the 9, when they're stressed, they go to the anxiety of the 6, feel very overwhelmed, and then will kind of shut down all their emotion, kind of numb out, and go to sleep. But their movement towards growth is that purposeful engagement of 3. And the felt need that's driving them is this need to avoid conflict and pressure, which can be very overwhelming. And because they're in the anger triad, the way they deal with that is they internalize it, which exhausts them. Just trying to manage and keep all their anger down and contain everybody else's peace and make the peace. They're really good at understanding what everybody in a group position. So they could be, that's why they're the peacemaker, because they can really understand your side, and both make perfect sense to them, and both are integrated in their mind. So they're very good as spiritual directors or counselors in that sense too, because they can really bring those 2 perspectives together and integrated.
Like the 4s, the 9s are tricky in that they're a relational type, but yet they also like their space. Mm-hmm. See, the 9s are in the middle of the gut triad, and the gut people want space, they want control. And so the 9s, that's most true of the 9, because either the 8 or the 1 wing are still in that gut triad, wanting control. Don't infringe on me. Don't make me do anything. The 9s are going inward with all of that. Anger is going inward into more of a depressive place, into a lethargy, an inertia. And a little way this kind of comes out with a 9 is like they have meandering stories. Lots of detail, but having trouble finding the point in that story. And as Christy mentioned, they can struggle to find their own personality because they're so other-centered. But then in the beauty of a 9 is this search for unity and oneness. And with a 9, they got this urge to merge. Mm-hmm. They always want to be more connected. They're not necessarily real outward about it, like an 8's very outward, but they love to be more connected, more tuned in, and will really see as Christy said, really see the good in other people. Yeah. And so the vice part is that inertia and that escaping into sleep, television, food, busyness, the withdrawing from activity. So yeah, I think that's pretty. Some of the experiments. What do we want to do for a 9 to grow?
Yeah, we're really becoming aware of your feelings, taking time to pray about those or journal about those, and finding safe places where you can express your feelings, because the 9s internalize so much and contain so much. So that's really helpful for them. And then the other thing is doing a body scan prayer, asking the Holy Spirit to help you understand where in your body are you containing this emotion or repressing this emotion, and getting in touch with that, and then being able to offer that to the Lord to get free of carrying that that tension and conflict there. The other thing to remember, a good gospel story for a 9 to meditate on, is Jesus healing the paralytic, because the 9s so often feel that powerlessness, and they need Jesus to come and help them engage and activate.
So that's a lot of Enneagram stuff.
We've laid it out.
That's a lot of information. You know, we tried to put it into conversation and story as much as we could. The best way you're gonna learn this now is walking it out and, you know, talking to each other about it and so forth. We've given you some handouts on each types, and I'm gonna improve those in the next weeks, and those will be on our Soul Shepherding website. So we got, you know, a quick summary sheet for each of the 9 types, and we've mentioned other resources for you. But what questions do you have? I know we had one over here. We want to hear from you. We have time. We need to dismiss you soon, but we could stay a little later for questions.
My question is, being in a family, and I'm not sure for sure, but I kind of have a feeling that maybe my wife and daughter are the same type. And does that tend to draw them together, or is it more of a repelling thing where they guys are free? Or not?
Well, I think it could be either, depending upon where they're at on the path of redemption. Generally, similar personalities are attracted because they understand each other, but they can get on each other's nerves. So, I mean, it can go either way. Yeah. I'm not really aware of that. I mean, generally, you know, the fear triad is the 5, 6, 7, but the 6 is right in the middle of that. So.
Yeah.
Well, that's probably too strong to say that nobody else would do that, but that's a defining trait of some 6s. All 6s aren't that way, but some 6s are. And it's just deceptive because they don't at first look like a 6 because they can be so bold.
Yes.
And so out there, so seemingly fearless.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Thank you.
Questions are good.
Yeah.
Whatever question you've got, somebody else has it.
So I'm just curious, what's the youngest, healthiest age to do a test like this? Like, I have a 13-year-old and an 11-year-old. I don't want to do it too soon, of course. Do you wait till they're adults?
It'd probably be hard for them to take a test, you know, maybe later in high school. But I think you can kind of observe things and begin to teach them some things. But I think the thing to be careful about is we don't want to put somebody in a box. Oh, you know, you're a 3. You know, I mean, to say, you know, you might be, or I think is a tool for understanding. In our family, I mean, our kids, it's kind of a joke. I mean, we're both therapists, right? But I mean, you know, they know that they're Myers-Briggs, they know their Enneagram, and then they do it with their friends, and then, you know, they bring their friends over to our house. Oh, our parents will tell you what you are. You know, they'll help you understand. So.
This book, Enneagram Made Easy, talks about what it's like for children at each of these types. The 1 is a child, the 2 is a child, you know, each one, and that can be helpful too in understanding your children.
Enneagram books are most of them are kind of hard to read because they're really dense and you've got to really be persistent. This is really easy because it's just all comics and bullet points and sections that are practical. And I've actually never read this book cover to cover in one sitting or, you know, like over a month or something, but I open it up all the time when I'm having a question about a particular type. And it just summarizes things for you. And I think that's the best way to learn the Enneagram is a little bit at a time. Now, we've given you a fire hose here, and you've got some notes to work on, just kind of get you going. But the main goal, if we just come back to where we started, the main goal is to say, hey, look, of all the personality tests, of all the psychological tools, this is the one that we found is the most helpful. And when we work with people in therapy and spiritual direction and soul friendship, they love it when we use the Enneagram with them because it's a common language you can get a hold of, and it gives you a very simple path for how to change. So, I mean, our daughter, who's a 9, we've been helping her about going to the 3 since probably a senior in high school.
Mm-hmm.
And it's been a hugely helpful for her.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
What if you have several that are very close and there's not one trait that really stands out, that you have several?
Yeah.
What do you do with that?
Well, that's probably true for others of you. And so, like we said at the beginning, it's very hard sometimes to hone in on, what is your type? Because you probably have those several in you, first of all.
Yeah.
And then second of all, you have to know how to read those test results when they're showing high numbers, high scores on a few different types. Well, one of those could be your type, one could be a wing, one could be a disintegration point, one could be an integration point. And so that's why we spend so much time going over the theory and the model, because when you understand that, then you can sort that through. So if I had time to talk with you, I could probably help you hone in on that. But you can replicate that just by reading about those types and then thinking about the model. So you just think, now, which helps me most? So in my case, if I'm a 1, okay, so that means under stress, I go towards the weaknesses of a 4. Do I actually do that? And does that cause problems for me? But now what would help me, the Enneagram says, if I go to the strengths of the 7, become more spontaneous and joyful, does that work for me? Is that like an important path for me? And when you see that model describes your experience in life, and okay, now I got it.
Yeah, really helpful. Right, ask some people too, like, what bugs you the most about me? Listen to that, because that might identify your root sin or some of those.
That takes courage to ask that question. That's good. Anybody else? You got a question? Somebody else probably has it.
Yeah.
Okay, so if you say I'm an achiever, and I'm supposed to start to put into practice to be a redemptive achiever, to become a loyalist, a healthy part of a loyalist. If you do that so well and continue to push into that, if you were to take this test again in 5 years, would you actually come up as a loyalist? Or would you still come up as an achiever, but the loyalist would just kind of maybe creep up on the ladder?
Probably what you said at the end there.
Yeah.
The test will show more and more 6 in you. But you probably are not going to change. But even if you do change, I think that the way to think about this is whoever you were in your early 20s, that's who you are. Because our unconscious bodily mechanisms with sin and dysfunction and coping mechanisms and how we deal with pain is so strong that there's just always this gravitational pull back in that direction. So it's probably, even if you develop lots of 6 in you, it's still probably going to be most helpful for you to understand yourself as a 3 that still needs to keep going towards that 6 and watch out for the weaknesses of the 9.
So then one thing that I think you mentioned that that's coming clear to me right now is that if you're struggling still finding your type, that one of the things that you just said, I don't think I read in the test instructions, but that was when you take the test, the way you've always been, as opposed to the way you think you are right now.
Yeah.
Because if you do that the way you think you are right now, you're not going to be able to really see who you are. But the way that I generally have always been would really help. So if some of you didn't take that test, you're struggling now with maybe knowing who you are. You might want to go back and redo that and rethink about the way I've always been. And I think that might help to do that. So, and another thing I really, I've gravitated towards is the sin part, and the words you guys used in the very beginning. If I'm struggling defining my type, it means I could be very defended against my sin.
Yes.
And so that's another reason we might struggle. Or if you're not liking your type even, it's like I'm so defended against that God wants to redeem that and set me free. So I just appreciated that part.
Yeah, and so I always will tell people, well, ask your spouse or your friend, who do you think I am? And have them read, the leading possibilities about you.
Yeah. Well, thank you guys so much.
Yeah.
Thanks for being here with us. Just give them a hand,
Thanks for
everybody.
having us. Should we pray? You close the prayer?
I'm going to pray
That's
for you
great.
guys.
Okay.
So I'd love to do that if you would let me.
Thank you. Yes.
They're going to go back to Southern Cal, right? And then they Wednesday, I believe, they get on another plane and go to New Mexico for to talk to some people about writing books and their experience in that. So we wanted to pray for you and blessing. So God, I just want to come before you and I pray for Bill and Christy. I thank you for their time with us over these 3-4 days, and I just really appreciate their willingness to come and give of themselves, to be flexible, to listen to the Holy Spirit as He speaks and guides them. And I've just sensed that that's their really heart's desire, is to just be open to the Spirit, even to change on the fly what they thought they were going to do, to be flexible and spontaneous. And so I just pray now your richest blessings on them, that as they go, that they would know that they've invested in people, in the kingdom, and that we have been shepherded in our souls by them, and just how much that means to us. And just pray that you would meet all of their needs, God, that you would meet their physical needs and their emotional needs and mental needs, the things that as they are pushing this week pretty hard, and all the teaching that they've been able to do. And I just pray that you would just help them now in the next day and a half to rest into you. And now, just in a little bit of time left here, that they would rest in the beauty of Nevada County and that they would want to come back and be with us again. We just thank you, Jesus, in your name. Amen.
Amen. Thank you.
So I suggested they want to go to lunch in Nevada City, and I suggested Lefties. Does anybody else have another recommendation besides Lefties? Mateo's. And why would you suggest that? Yeah, anywhere in that area.
Great.
Mateo's Republic, Lefties. Lefties, you said on the creek. There, you would just sit in the beauty of seeing the tree colors and everything. Yeah. So,
thank you.
Thank you guys, and
thank
you for being here.
Yeah.
Anybody have a question? I'm sure they'll stay
Yeah,
around.
we'll hang around if you have questions. Yeah.